Before we continue reading in our subject, the clear statement, which is a brief explanation of the Mukhtasar, the summary of Shaykh Abdullah al-Harari, rahmatullahi alayh. We remind ourselves to have the intention to fast tomorrow for Ramadan. We left off on page 18, the meaning of the two testifications of faith. And the last time we had this class, we mentioned the important judgment, which is that if the person is accountable and not Muslim, then the first thing that they must do is embrace al-Islam immediately without delay and comply with what is obligatory upon them of its rules, and to remain steadfast, technically forever. So that means the person, the Muslim, he has to have in his heart that he is always going to stay on Islam, that he will remain on Islam, and that he will never leave al-Islam. And so the author told us that in order for a non-Muslim to enter into al-Islam is by saying the two shahadas, by believing in and saying the two shahadas. And so now he's going to explain the meaning of the two shahadas. For whoever has the book, we do have copies that you can purchase for a good price. It's not a lot, and still the information here is priceless, and you can always go back to it and read it. There's enough space in the margins to make notes and to really treat it as a document that you refer back to if you need to review or if you need to get some information. So we're on page 18. The author said, since the two testifications of faith are the basis of the call to Islam, it is an obligation for the Muslim to know their meaning. Hence the author, may Allah have mercy on him, started by explaining the first shahada and said, the meaning of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah is I know, I believe, that is, I accept in my heart and I declare with my tongue that nothing is worshipped rightfully except Allah. That is, nothing deserves to be worshipped except Allah. The meaning of worship, al-ibadah, in the Arabic language, is the ultimate submission and subjugation, as stated by the linguist and hafiz Taqiyuddin as-Subki. If you have the book, the footnote number 1, Taqiyuddin as-Subki is a highly ranked scholar of hadith, and he is a hafiz. This title is usually given to a person who memorizes most of the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the chain of narrators of each hadith. So like we said, where do we get our information from? Where do we get the information that we need to obey our Creator, to obey our Lord? We have to get it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because no matter how you cut it, the Quran, which is the final revelation to mankind, was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was revealed to his heart. Sometimes it would just be revealed directly to his heart. Sometimes Angel Jibreel alayhi salam would appear in front of him and would recite the verses of the Quran that are being revealed, and so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would instantly memorize them, and he would convey them to the people. He would recite those verses to the people. And also, besides the Quran, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke words that are through the revelation, but they don't have the same judgment as the Quran. So sometimes there would be a conflict amongst two Muslims, and those two Muslims, they want a resolution. They want the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to judge between them, and so they would go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, since he is the receiver of the revelation, and they would tell him the situation and they would ask him to judge. And so how would the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam judge? He would judge through the revelation. Allah Ta'ala would reveal to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the proper answer, the proper solution. And so those things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke, they were absorbed and memorized, and they were preserved by those companions, and they passed it on. So one thing, one feature, one virtue, one special thing about this Muslim nation is that they did not betray the Prophet ﷺ after he passed away. After the Prophet ﷺ passed away, they didn't flip, they didn't turn on the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't corrupt his teachings, they didn't change things. Because Allah Ta'ala, He preserved this information, and also because those men, and they were guided. And even though they don't have the same status as the prophets, but they were trustworthy and they were God-fearing. And it's mentioned in the Quran that the ones who truly fear Allah are the scholars. So there were men who were true and honest and loyal to the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, and they merely conveyed it as they heard it. They passed on the information as they got it, and so this information is still with us today. So no one can come and try to discredit the hadith, because by them discrediting the hadith, it's as if they are rejecting Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And if they say that they don't reject Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but they reject the men that came after him, it's as if they're saying that there is no Islam anymore. And we know that this is not the case, because we are a Muslim nation, and the Muslim nation is mentioned repeatedly in the Quran that they are guided and that they are a moderate nation and that they are the best of nations. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. So this verse is explicit. Allah Ta'ala is naming the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the best of all nations, because of the fact that they order the lawful and they forbid the unlawful. That means they adhere to what the Prophet ﷺ came with. The author said, hence it is known that worship does not simply mean obedience to, calling upon, seeking help from, or fearing someone, as some people think. So worship, it has a specific meaning, and it means the ultimate humbleness and submission. So anything that is outside of that definition is not called worship. So if I tell someone, help me, if I tell a creation to help me, that by itself does not mean that I'm worshiping them, because I'm not giving them my ultimate submission. I'm only seeking their help. I'm seeking a means to an end. The author said, Allah is one, Al-Wahid, the one who has no partner in godhood, indivisible, Al-Ahad, the one who does not accept division and having parts, because he is not a body. He is neither a tangible, kathif body, which is grasped by the hand like humans, trees, and stones, nor an intangible, latif body that cannot be grasped by the hand like light, darkness, and the wind. He is without a beginning, al-awwal, the one who has no beginning to his existence. His existence was not preceded by inexistence, and in the same meaning is eternal, al-qadim, when used in reference to Allah, because the eternity of Allah is His own attribute and is not subject to time. Of course, because time is a creation. So before Allah created time, He existed, and that means that Allah Ta'ala is not subject to time. So when we say that Allah is eternal, that means without a beginning and without time. He is alive, Al-Hayy, the one attributed with eternal and everlasting life that is not dependent on soul, flesh, blood, ligaments, or bone marrow. His life is a confirmed attribute that is eternal. He is Al-Qayyum, the one who does not need others, the everlasting, Ad-Da'im, the one whose existence is without an end, and it is impossible for his existence to end, because the sound mind dictates that it is impossible for Allah to be non-existent. Hence, no one is everlasting in that sense except Allah. So here we say that Allah Ta'ala does not come to an end, because non-existence does not apply to Allah. because non-existence is something that only applies to the creations. We, before we began to exist, we were nothing. That is, we were non-existent. After we began to exist, since we can accept non-existence and existence, that means it's possible for us, it's inevitable for us that we would be non-existent again, because that's the nature of being a creation. But non-existence does not apply to Allah because He is the Creator. So had non-existence been applicable to Allah, He would not be the Creator, He would be a creation. Now why do we point that out? Because there are some creations that Allah made them never ending. Allah created certain creations and He willed that they remain existing forever and ever, like paradise and like hellfire. So even though paradise and hellfire, they exist without an end, but they only exist without an end because Allah made them that way. Allah Ta'ala, He exists without an end, not because someone made Him that way, but because it is an attribute of His reality, because He's the Creator. Hence, no one is everlasting in that sense except Allah. He is the Creator, Al-Khaliq, the one who brought all the creations from inexistence into existence. The Sustainer, Al-Raziq, the one who makes livelihood reach His slaves. The Omniscient, Al-Alim, the one who is attributed with the eternal and everlasting attribute of knowledge that does not change, increase, decrease, or get renewed. He is knowledgeable, not like other knowledgeable ones, because His knowledge is eternal and the knowledge of others is originated, yani it's created. The Omnipotent, Al-Qadir, the one attributed with the perfect power. The power of Allah is an eternal and everlasting attribute by which Allah influences the mentally possible, that is, what is possible mentally to exist at one time and not exist at another, yani like us. Since we were nothing before we became something, that means we accept both states. By His power, Allah makes things exist and makes them stop existing. The one who does whatever He wills, that is, Allah has the power to bring into existence whatever He eternally willed to exist. Nothing can render Allah powerless to do so. He does whatever He wills without toil, and no one prevents Him from doing it. That is, whatever Allah willed eternally to be existing shall be existing, and whatever Allah did not will eternally to be existing shall not be existing. So this gives comfort to the Muslim. We don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know what our future is going to be. We don't know what the future of the world is going to be. We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month or next year. All we know is that we're here right now and we have to obey Allah. So we cannot use the possibility of something happening in the future as an excuse to disobey Allah in the present. We can't say, oh, tomorrow such and such thing might happen, so I'm not going to pray today. We can't say, oh, such and such thing might happen tomorrow, so I'm going to get haram money. We can't say, oh, such and such thing might happen in the future, so I'm going to not fast. No, we have to obey Allah regardless of what might happen in the future. And what's an example that our teachers that they give in this context and in this subject is like during COVID. Wasn't it the case that many people were frightened and panicked and they were terrified and horrified of coming to the mosque because, oh no, they might get the coronavirus. But you don't know if you're going to get the coronavirus. If you're going to get the coronavirus, you're going to get it if you're by yourself at the top of a mountain with nobody around. If Allah willed for you to get the coronavirus, you're going to get it if you're locked away in the basement in your room. So you cannot use the fear of getting the coronavirus to not do your obligations. And specifically this applies to the men, of course. In many Muslim countries, what did they do? They said, oh, you don't have to come to the Jumu'ah because of COVID. Na'udhu billah. So many people fell into so many sins because of that. And this is an example of what we're saying. Whatever Allah willed to be shall be, and whatever Allah did not will to be shall not be. So, and there is a precedent. You should know this. It's part of our history. At one point in time, there was a plague in Al-Madinah. A plague, not like COVID. COVID is not a plague. COVID is not like the bubonic plague. COVID is not like what they call epidemic. It's not like that. It's less than that. But during the time of the companions in Al-Madinah, there was an actual plague. Thousands of Muslims dropping dead from this plague, a real plague. And none of the companions and none of the Muslims of that time canceled Jumu'ah. None of them canceled the Hajj. Actually, some companions, from the strength of their Iman, they would, and if, for example, some people were scared of that plague and they were like trying to avoid putting stuff in their mouth. One companion, he literally put his finger in his mouth to show the rest of the people that you should not fear these things. Because whatever Allah will to be shall be, and whatever Allah did not will to be shall not be. If you're going to die from COVID, you're going to die from COVID. If you're going to die from the plague, you're going to die from the plague. Anyways, the Muslim, he knows that what he's working for in this life is for his life after death. What Muslim thinks that they're going to live here forever, in the Quran and in the Hadith and the unanimous agreement of the Muslim scholars, it's known that this life is leaving. This life is on its way out. So the one who clings to it is not the smart one. The smart one is not the one who clings to this world, because you're going to leave it anyways. So you can do all the protection that you want. You can lock all the doors, lock all the windows. You can put yourself in a bubble, but still death will reach you. The will of Allah does not change, because the change of the will implies origination, and origination is impossible to be attributed to Allah. The one without whom no sin is avoided and no obedience is fulfilled, that is, no one can evade sinning except with Allah's protection, and no one has the ability to obey except with Allah's help. So this is a way for the Muslim to remain humble. You pray 5 times a day, all you can do is say Alhamdulillah that Allah gave me the ability to obey. You avoid the haram, you avoid fornication, you avoid drinking alcohol, you avoid consuming riba, you avoid gossip, you avoid tale-bearing, you avoid looking at what is forbidden or listening to what's forbidden. Then you say Alhamdulillah that Allah protected me. Because without Allah's protection, you would fall into that sin. And without Allah's help, you would fall short in the obligation. Allah is attributed with all proper perfection, like knowledge, power, and will, and He is clear of all imperfection. That is, He is clear of whatever does not befit Him, like ignorance, powerlessness, color, boundaries, and being in a direction and place. Because all these are among the attributes of the creation. Hence, Allah exists without a place. Allah Ta'ala revealed, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. This ayah means Allah does not resemble any of His creation in any way, and He is attributed with hearing and sight. Allah mentioned first in the verse that nothing is like Him, prior to mentioning that He is attributed with hearing and sight. Hence, no one would misinterpret the ayah and think that the hearing of Allah and His sight are like the hearing and sight of others. Allah is dissimilar to the creations, as Dhunnun al-Misri, may Allah raise his rank, said, whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah does not resemble it. So this is the main core creed of Islam. The Creator is not like us. Allah is not like a creation. Allah is not like a human. He's not like a spirit. He's not like a light. He's not like anything in this universe, because everything in this universe has a beginning. Allah exists without a beginning. Al-Qadim, and everything else is originated, which means everything other than Allah started existing after inexistence. He is the creator of all beings, and everything other than Allah, that is, the whole universe, is a creation that has a beginning. The whole universe with its kind and elements is originated. Ibn Taymiyyah disagreed about the first part and stated, like the philosophers, that the kind of the universe is eternal without a beginning. Consequently, the Muslims deemed him a non-Muslim kafir, because what Ibn Taymiyyah was saying is that before the actual Arsh, before this throne that we know, there was another one before it, and before that one there was another, and before that one there was another, going backwards in time until no end. And we have confirmed that this thing is called infinite regression. We have confirmed that infinite regression is mentally impossible because it leads to negating the present moment. Like we said before, you cannot be here unless a series of moments started and ended until you're here in the present time. So the one who says that you can go backwards in time until no end, it's as if they were saying that infinity has to end in order for right now to occur. And to say that for forever to end is a contradiction in terms, and for sure it is falsehood. Every creation that came into existence, be it among entities, which are things that have a volume or deeds, whether voluntary or involuntary, are by the creating of Allah. All entities, from the fine dust or smaller to the grand throne, Arsh, which is the largest creation of Allah, are by the creating of Allah. And the outward deeds, including every movement, rest, and inward deeds, including the intention and thoughts of the slaves that occur involuntarily, are created by Allah. Basically, the author is saying, Allah is the creator of everything without exception. Good and evil, sweet and bitter, light and dark. All dualities are created by the Creator. Every single aspect of you as a human is created by Allah. The angels and the devils are created by Allah. Everything is created by Allah. There is not one thing that exists without Allah creating it. Hence, no one other than Allah creates anything, be it nature, which are the normal characteristics that Allah made entities characterized with, such as the nature of fire is burning, or illah, which is a cause that whenever it exists, the effect exists, and whenever the cause is non-existent, the effect is non-existent, like the movement of the finger with a ring is the cause for the movement of the ring. So basically here it's saying, first let's talk about nature. The nature of fire is to burn, the nature of a knife is to cut, the nature of water is to quench thirst, the nature of food is to satisfy the hunger, etc. So we say fire does not create the burning. The knife does not create the cutting. The food does not create the feeling of being satisfied from hunger. The water does not create the quenching of the thirst. These are merely, the nature of fire is that, and Allah is the one who created the fire and created its effect. Allah is the one who created the knife and created its effect. Allah is the one who created the water and its effect. So we don't say that fire creates burning. We don't say that the knife creates cutting. We don't say that the water creates the quenching of the thirst, because only Allah creates. So the nature of a thing doesn't create. The second thing is something called illah. They don't have a translation for it in English. It's an Arabic term, but the definition of it is that it's something that whenever it itself exists, then its effect also exists. So it's consistent, the result or the effect is consistent with the existence of the thing itself. And so the example that is given to clarify that is, if someone's wearing a ring on the finger and they move their finger, then because the movement of the finger exists, the movement of the ring exists. But that phenomena is not creating the movement of the ring. So the fact that if I move my finger, the ring also moves, doesn't mean that the movement of my finger creates the movement of the ring. This is called the illah in Arabic. If there is a proper term for it in English, I'll come up with it. But the point here is, neither of these two things, neither nature nor illah, create anything. Rather, nature and illah, they themselves are created. Now why does the author say that? Because some philosophers, they say that nature is what created this universe. And we say that this is invalid because nature itself is a creation. Nature doesn't have a will. Nature is not sentient. The second thing is, some philosophers, they say that by God existing, automatically the universe existed. So they say, because Allah exists, then automatically the universe came into existence. And we say also, this is not correct, because we say Allah made the universe exist by His will, yani He specified the universe to exist. Not that the universe automatically existed because God exists. So that's why the author mentioned that. Things become existent by Allah's eternal will, power, and destining, and in accordance with His eternal knowledge, as mentioned in the Quran, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Surah Al-Furqan, verse 2 means Allah created everything. He brought all the creation from non-existence into the state of existence. No one creates with this meaning of creating except Allah. هَلْ مِنْ خَالِقٍ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ. Surah Fatir, verse 3 means no one is the creator except Allah. So this is being emphasized. Why? Because maybe 100 years or so after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, there was a misguided group of people that they call themselves the Mu'tazila. And these people, or they were known as the Mu'tazila. And these people, they attributed themselves to Islam, but they said something that was completely against Islam, which is they claimed, right, and what they said is incorrect and blasphemous and not true. They claimed that the human being himself, that he is the creator of his own voluntary actions. So, of course, their fallacy and their supposed reasoning for that doesn't make any sense, and it goes against the mind, and for sure they are contradicting the Quran. But basically this is why the author is emphasizing this, because it is one of the very simple basic creeds of Islam, that only God is the creator, not us. We don't create anything. We don't create our deeds, we don't create our actions. We simply acquire the consequences of our actions. So those misguided people, one of the reasons that they said that is because they have a misunderstanding, they have a bad outlook, a bad perspective, and they thought to themselves, well, if we don't create our own deeds, and God is the one who creates what we do, and if we were to do something that's bad, and God is the creator of that, and what they say is wrong, they say if God were to hold us accountable for the bad things that we did, although He created it, they claim, na'udhu billah, that God would be unjust. So because supposedly they want to clear God of being unjust, they say, no, God did not create our bad deeds. We created our own bad deeds, and that's why we're accountable, and that's why we're punished, and so God is just. And so we say, Allah has the absolute authority. He creates whatever He wills, He does whatever He wills. We are the ones who chose the bad action, even though God is the one who created it, and God is the one who willed for us to do that, but He forbade us from doing that. And the fact that He created for us to do that, because He knew in eternity that we would choose that action, that we would make that decision. And so that's why we're held accountable for the bad things that we do, even though Allah is the creator of it, because He didn't force us to do the bad thing, and He forbade us from doing the bad thing, and we still chose to do it. So that's why we're accountable. The Muslims deemed them non-Muslims for this. The Muslims judged that bad group, the Mu'tazila, as non-Muslims for that, because they're basically saying there's millions of gods. We say La ilaha illallah, that there's only one God, and the Mu'tazila are saying that there's billions and trillions of gods. Because not only do they say that the human being creates his own voluntary actions, but they say even the insects create their own voluntary actions. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. Imam Abu Hafs, Umar ibn Ahmad al-Nasafi, may Allah have mercy upon him, said in his famous book, the Nasafi Creed. So here the author is basically giving us an example of something that one of the scholars said to clarify this point. He said, if a person hit glass with a stone and broke it, then the acts of hitting by the person, which may or may not result in breaking, and breaking, which is the act of the slave done to the glass by throwing the stone, and the state of the glass being broken, which is the effect taking place in the glass, such as cracking and spreading and the like, were created by Allah, not by the slave. Hence, the slave only acquires the act, which is directing one's intention towards the deed, and Allah is the only one who creates it at that time. So, the person throwing the stone is created by Allah. The hand that is holding the stone is created by Allah. The stone itself is created by Allah. The flying of the stone through the air and reaching the glass is created by Allah. The glass itself is created by Allah. The effect that the stone has on the glass by shattering it is created by Allah. The shattered pieces of the glass now, they go from a complete piece of glass to a shattered piece of glass. That's created by Allah. What is for the slave? For the slave is the accountability and the consequence of that action. If by that slave throwing that stone, he has done something that is forbidden by God, then that slave would be judged for it. And he would be held accountable for it. He would be questioned for it. He would have to pay for it. Because why? Because the slave himself is the one who directed his hand towards the throwing. The slave is the one who intended to throw this stone and to hit that glass. That's why the slave would be held responsible for that action, even though he didn't create it. Hence, we read that already. Allah revealed in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 286, لَهَا مَا كَسَبَتْ وَعَلَيْهَا مَا اكْتَسَبَتْ, which means every individual self will be rewarded by Allah for the good deeds it acquired. That is, this person will benefit from that and will be accountable for the sins it committed. This person will bear the consequences for doing evil, meaning he will be harmed. Hence, the slave is attributed with acquiring the deeds, not creating them, and he is judged for what he acquired. And he is judged for what he acquired because Allah did not force him to do that. Allah did not force him to disobey, and Allah did not force him to obey. Allah gave the slave a certain limited will, because we can only do what Allah wills for us to do. But the difference is, Allah knows in eternity what all the decisions that we are going to make. You don't know the decisions that you're going to make in the future, in the next moment. But you know that, for example, you have to go right instead of left. Now, which one will you choose? You don't know. Allah knew in eternity which one you would choose. And so He willed for you to do what He knew you were going to do. As for you, you're ordered and morally obligated to make the right decision. But God will not force you to make the right decision. And if you make the wrong decision, that was by your own doing, not by your creating, and that's why you're held accountable. And inshallah, we'll stop there. The next case is about the kalam of Allah. I want your minds to be fresh on that. But we'll do just a little bit. So, Allah is attributed with an attribute called al-kalam. This is an Arabic term, and some people translate that into English as speech, but it is not a sound, letter, or language. Just like all the attributes of God, they are not. They have no beginning. They have no end. They don't change. They don't increase or decrease. So God is attributed with an attribute called al-kalam, which some refer to it as speech. And so the speech of God is not a sound, letter, or language. It is eternal and everlasting, and it is without a beginning, like all His other attributes, including life, knowledge, power, hearing, and sight. They are eternal because the eternal being is not attributed with a created attribute. And there is the concept of holding true to the judgment of the mind. Now, a lot of people these days, they don't care about logic or reasoning. They say things that are outrageous and outside the realm of sanity, just because they are able to say those words. But if a person wants to speak objectively, then they cannot say, for example, like some people say about Prophet Jesus alayhi salam. They say that Jesus existed forever. They say that Jesus has no beginning. And so we say, just by observation, and even by their own admittance, Prophet Jesus alayhi salam changed, right? He was born as an infant, even though it was through the Immaculate Conception, which we confirm is true. But he was born from a woman, and as an infant, and he grew and he developed and he became a man. He changed and he went through these stages. So we say something that is like that for sure has a beginning, and it cannot be called eternal, that is without a beginning, because these changes are beginnings and ends in and of themselves. So somebody can't say that something, let's say, is born and has a beginning and then say that it's been existing forever. Those two things cannot go together. This is called a contradiction. This is called an intellectual impossibility. You can't have it both ways. Some people, because they're delusional, because they don't use the mind, because they're not concerned with evidence and facts, they're only concerned with their feelings and their emotions and their bias, they think that they can have it both ways. But you cannot have it both ways. It's only one way. So the thing that changes and goes through stages, that thing for sure has a beginning. You cannot say that it's been existing forever. And also, even they claim that, and we don't say this, they say that Prophet Jesus alayhi salam died. So if something dies, then for sure it has a beginning. Because that means that if they're saying that it died, that means that they're saying now it's nothing now, or it's non-existent now. And so if something was existing and then it's non-existing, that means it had to have that state previously of non-existence to existence. Subhanallah. So that's why we say that the speech of God is eternal and it is not created. And so from this it is known that the speech of God is not a letter, sound, or language, and is not started or finished. So, because if someone says that God speaks a language is letters and sounds, beginnings and ends, starting and stopping, and segments and pausing, and that is beginnings and ends. That is starting and stopping, beginning and ending, non-existing, then existing, and whatever is attributed with that, then it itself has a beginning. So we don't say about Allah that He has a beginning, and so for sure His attributes do not have a beginning. So we'll stop there, inshallah. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. We'll do the prayer, and then dessert, and then qiyam.